if you want to learn your music more quickly, more efficiently, and more thoroughly so it sticks deeper in there, then this is the video for you. My name is Josh Gu, and after years of studying the clarinet with some of the best teachers from around the world, I am excited to be sharing my knowledge with you. So go to QuickStartClarinet.com or check the description on this video to see all of the wonderful resources I have to help you reach your clarinet dreams. And of course, subscribe to this channel for weekly clarinet and music tips and tricks. Have you ever been trying to practice or learn a piece of music and you feel like you've gone over it time and time again, but it's just like not sticking? It feels like it's a new piece of music like every day that you come to it. That can be really frustrating. But on the other hand, have you ever been practicing a piece of music and you feel like you played it and you're like, okay, I think this is making sense. And then the next day you come to it and you're like, oh yeah, I got this, no problem. There's a reason for each of those, the situation where you don't remember anything and the situation where it seems like it almost learned itself. And I think the key to getting more of the latter, where it learns itself, has to do with encoding layers. That's sort of what I'm calling it. There's maybe a better, more scientific term for it, but I think it's a pretty simple idea once I explain it. So what this has to do with is how the information of the music is being encoded into your brain. And I think there is some scientific research about how this connects. I'm not super well versed in the research, so this is loosely how I feel what's happening in my brain. Who knows if that's what's actually happening or not. If you have any good research or scientific articles about this idea, I would love to read them. So if you could drop the link in the comments, that would be awesome. But I don't have any like hard science that I'm operating off of. This is just sort of what I feel. But it feels to me that when I add more layers to my encoding, things go better. So let me explain what I mean by this. There's kind of two ways to go about learning something. You can just do it on pure repetition alone. And I think this is where you get frustrated, where you're like, oh, I did so many repetitions yesterday, but it still like isn't sticking. It doesn't feel new. And what it feels like to me in your brain when you're doing that is you're sort of working one neural pathway. So it's one neuron firing to the next, firing down your muscles, and you sort of get that one pathway of like play the run or the scale or the rhythm, whatever it is. You're just getting that one pathway going over and over and over. And this does make for a very strong connection and can give you that really good subconscious muscle memory, but it takes a while. It takes many, many repetitions for it to stick because you're just sort of working that one pathway over and over and over. So what I think is better, instead of just doing the one pathway, is to add some layers to it. And I think the way that that works is looking at it in as many different ways as possible. When you play dee-da-da-da-da-da-dum, that's just one way of looking at it. But if you did dee-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-dum, like dotted rhythms, for example, that's a slightly different way of looking at it. And your brain has to think a little bit differently, so you're strengthening a slightly different neural pathway. It's sort of like an adjacent pathway. And then maybe if you do da-da-da-da-da-da-dum, you do it backwards. That's like a slightly different neural pathway that's being worked on and strengthened. If you do it as, oh, instead of playing the whole scale, I'm going to break it down into like up to the fifth, D, 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 and then the next, D, 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 D. That's a slightly different way of looking at it that makes your brain think of it in another way. So coming up with as many different layers as you can, I think goes from just one pathway that you're trying to strengthen through repetition alone and starts to develop these layers and almost this whole network of this one idea. And I think when you do that, it encodes into your brain a little bit deeper, it gets in there a little bit stronger, and you start to move through the music faster and learn it faster because it's getting in there deeper. And when you come back the next day, it's at a level higher than where you left it because it's had time to soak in at different ways and different angles. This also is another case for why deliberate practicing is so important, because if you're just doing the same thing over and over and going for just that one repetition way of doing it, that's not going to be nearly as effective as deliberately doing things differently. So when you're doing that run, for example, dotted rhythms, different speeds are also sort of slightly different layers and makes your brain think. Different groupings, not just doing a small chunk and a small chunk, but maybe instead of doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, or whatever the groupings work out to be. That is, again, another layer that's going to build in there, and that's a way to practice deliberately, to change it up, mix it up, not do it exactly the same way over and over and over, and build those different layers of encoding so that it gets in there deeper. So now I want to actually challenge you in 2 ways. One, I want you to try this when you're practicing. Next time you're practicing a small chunk of music, or you could even do this on a piece by doing different chunks as a different way of encoding it. But I want you to try doing some of these different layers of learning it when you're learning a new piece. Another layer that I didn't mention is the theory side of it too. If you can look at it as a C major arpeggio rather than C, E, G, or however you normally think about it, that can be really good and help you to encode it a little bit better as well. And the second challenge that I want you to do is put in the comments one of the ways to mix up the encoding and another way that you can look at music in a slightly different angle. I sort of mentioned a lot already in this video, but there's a lot more, and the more creative you can be about how to practice deliberately and find those different ways to look at it, the better off your practicing is going to be, the more efficient your practicing is going to be, and the easier it's going to be for you to deeply learn music rather than just pushing at that surface level one pathway over and over and over for years before it starts to sink in. So let me know in the comments some of your ideas. Thanks for watching this video and taking the time to learn something. Hopefully you learned something new, and I look forward to seeing you in another video.